People who have snapped on a bully at school. What's your story? Story 1. I was 7, and I was a nice kid with average grades, and this one bully that was taller than me. He used to be any typical bully, like trip you on your lunch and push your head for no apparent reason, and I was getting annoyed that I felt the red heat go all over my body. I looked at him and told him to stop. I looked at him and he pushed me to the ground. I stopped and kicked his genitals and punched his nose with all my force, and his nose started to bleed, and I was sent to the office. My mom had this thing where if they started it, then she'll pretend that she's mad at me at school and then came home saying congrats. Story 2. Not at school, but I was 12 and a kid on my block constantly challenged me to fight him because he knew I wouldn't want to. So it was a great way for this chubby, incompetent brat to show off. One day outside the convenience store, to his surprise, I accepted. He came towards me and I basically just lifted up my leg and kicked him in the stomach. Honestly, he just bounced off my foot. And in shock, he came at me again. This repeated about 3 times as the expression of disbelief on his face became more pathetically pronounced. He finally gave up and ran past my house, telling my mother, who happened to be outside, that I beat him up. But she already knew about his behavior towards me, so as soon as I explained what happened, it was all good. He wasn't actually hurt physically, just emotionally. And we both learned a good lesson that day, and he actually grew up to be a decent guy, from what I could tell. Well, looks like this kid gave him a taste of the old kick and disbelief combo. Talk about a knockout performance. I bet that expression of shock on his face is just priceless. Who knew that your foot had the power of a superhero? You showed him that size doesn't matter when it comes to a swift, unexpected move. And hey, it's good to hear that he grew up to be a decent guy. Maybe your foot kick was the catalyst for his personal growth. So kudos to this person for standing up for themselves and teaching them a lesson that he won't forget. Story 3. I had been bullied all year long by this guy, and it was the last week of 8th or 9th grade. Comes up to me and says something about my clothes or something, and I just saw red. I turned around and hit him with a palm strike to the face. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and then I bolted. I heard later that his lip got stuck in his braces and he had to go to the doctor to fix it. I got a stern talking to about not hitting people, although my teachers were aware of the verbal bullying. Story 4. 5th grade. Can't remember what specifically caused me to snap, but after spending the last 5 years being continually harassed, bullied, and assaulted by a specific boy, I'd had enough. I calmly walked up to the mounted pencil sharpener at the back of the class and sharpened my pencil to a very fine tip. Then, I walked behind said bully and in a downward motion slashed him across the entirety of his back in one fluid motion. Now obviously, I got a truckload of scolding for what I did. The principal insinuated to my mother that the parents of the other boy may want to press charges for my harming of their pride and joy. My mother, bless her heart, retorted back, well, if that's the case, perhaps I should press charges considering how often my son has been coming home with cuts, bruises, and welts administered at their boy's hands without repercussions from your staff. The principal moonwalked out of that conversation so fast. I was still read the riot act at home, though, and it drilled into me that what I did was to use a weapon to harm someone, and that it would never be tolerated at any level. Grounded for a very, very long time. The bully gave me space for a while anyway, and then went back to his usual torment after a couple weeks, minus any physical contact. Story 5. I didn't snap at a bully, but I did snap at a teacher who didn't do anything no matter how many times I told her I was being bullied. All my bullies, their parents were on the parent council. They got funding for field trips and things like that, so the kids were basically untouchable. I yelled at the teacher, telling her what they had done to me. Things like taking my school supplies, excluding me from activities, calling me names, and throwing things at me, along with other things. I told him how I was sick and tired of being blamed and that it was my fault that I had no friends when every single bully told people to avoid me. They invented this thing called the Katie touch, like the cheese touch, but you could get the Katie touch if you talk to me. And I finished it by telling her that she was stupid and was too worried about losing school funding that she didn't care what happened to her students. No one backed me up, and nothing changed. I got a 3-day in-school suspension, and the bullying got worse. The kids would take my lunch and shoes, so I would get in trouble for not wearing my indoor shoes, and then I passed out one time from hunger and dehydration from not eating. I hated that school, and I'm so glad that I went to a junior high that didn't have anyone else in there from my old elementary. Wow, this guy didn't just snap, you unleashed a verbal hurricane on that teacher. It's frustrating when those who are supposed to protect us turn a blind eye to our struggles. And they laid it all out, giving that teacher a dose of reality. The Katie touch? Seriously, those bullies should have won awards for their creativity in being awful. It's infuriating how they could get away with such cruel behavior just because of their parents' influence. And as for the teacher, it seems like her priorities were a little skewed, focusing more on school funding than the well-being of her students. It's disappointing that no one backed you up, that the suspension only made things worse. But hey, silver lining, moving on to a different junior high was like stepping into a whole new world where you could leave that nightmare behind. So here's to leaving the Katie touch and all those bullies in the dust and embracing a brighter future. Story 6. I was severely bullied from my earliest memory all the way through high school. The times I remember snapping were these. 3rd grade, we were putting the chairs upside down onto the desks at the end of the day, and this kid kept pushing my chair and pushing me. I turned around and shoved him as hard as I could with both hands, and he fell onto the desk behind him. The chair fell off, and then he fell off onto the chair, and I got in trouble. In 4th grade, at some Boy Scout thing, there were sodas, and I got one out of the cooler, and a kid who bullied me a lot grabbed it out of my hand and walked away. I grabbed another one and then threw it at the back of his head. Got in trouble, of course. 7th or 8th grade, after being bullied incessantly, I lost it and was crying and screaming and punching the lockers, and then got in trouble for denting a couple of them. In 9th or 10th grade, while on the bus, one of the bullies grabbed my comb out of my back pocket. He messed with me a lot, and rather than punching for some reason, I used my open hand to slap him really hard on top of his head. He was seated and I was standing in the aisle. He complained of his neck hurting from it, and then I got in trouble. Between each of these instances, I'd put up with constant bullying every day and do nothing, and then no teachers gave a crap. Bullies got away with bullying all the time, but even if I simply said, "Leave me alone," in a loud voice, I was in trouble. It never made any sense to me. Story 7. This was in 7th grade, I think. I threw a shoe at him in a change room. He was just picking on some random kid, and I just had enough of his crap. I completely missed him and then hit the guy that he was picking on right in the face. Everyone froze for a second and then burst out into laughter, and the guy who was being picked on started crying. And I felt really bad because I meant to hit the bully. Shoes are hard to throw accurately, by the way. I tried to tell him that it was for the bully, and I guess I calmed him down a little bit, also by apologizing profusely. And after the incident, the mood in the change room was lightened and everyone started being more chill with each other, so I guess it was a success. Story 8. Beat mine with a hockey stick one day after school. We were playing road hockey and he lived down the street. He just kept going on, and to be honest, I saw red. I just remember my dad pulling me off while I was slamming my wooden goalie stick into his side while he tried to cover his bleeding face. His parents never pursued anything. My parents took me to counseling. He ended up nearly killing his best friend in a drinking and driving accident. Friend was never the same, like permanently injured. And the bully took his own life a few years later after he didn't make a junior hockey team. I still feel bad, and I have never been in any violent interaction before or since. Now as an adult and an educator, I know that he was likely really hurting, so I'm sorry. Story 9. This happened 6 years ago when I was in 5th grade and the bully was in 6th grade. I'd gotten to school a bit early and was just chilling on my phone when the bully came up and started ranting about how I couldn't be on my phone. So me, "Hey, school hasn't even started yet. Besides, it's not your business." Bully, "Well, I'll go tell a teacher and they'll take your phone away." Yeah, childish, I know. Me, "Yeah, they won't care. School hasn't started yet, just go away." He then reached for my phone and he literally tried to take it. Of course, I didn't let him. I was getting really frustrated and told him again to go away, and he didn't. He decided it was a good idea to punch me in the face. Now, I wasn't ready for it at all, so I didn't even have time to put my arms up or anything. Just caught a fist straight to the face. Now, I was a pretty small girl back then, and the bully was a year older, and apparently played a lot of sports and stuff. And on top of that, he was standing up, and I was sitting down. I just snapped. Without even thinking, I punched back as hard as I could. He just kind of stared at me before running off. I could literally hear him crying. He shouted at me that he'd tell a teacher, but no one mentioned it to me ever again, and I never got into trouble. The bully didn't bother me even once after that. Yeah, talk about a punchline that packed a punch. You were just minding your own business, enjoying some phone time before school, when Mr. Bully decides to rain on your parade. Clearly, he didn't get the memo that it wasn't his business to meddle with your phone affairs. But hey, kudos to this person for standing their ground and asserting their rights. When this other guy resorted to physical violence, this person unleashed a counterpunch that left him stunned and running for the hills, apparently. It's amazing how a swift retaliation can change the dynamics. The crying and threats to tell a teacher, yeah, that's classic bully behavior when the tables are turned. But guess what? You never heard a peep about it, and the bully probably learned a valuable lesson. From that day on, they must have realized that picking on this person was a fight that they couldn't win. Way to defend themselves and turn the tide in their favor. Keep that spirit alive and let no one underestimate your strength, physically and mentally. Story 10. This wasn't me, but a quiet kid at school one of the bullies was picking on. The quiet kid never reacted even when the bully punched him. And this went on for months, and the bully was always trying to get this guy to fight him. And the kid always said, "I don't want to fight you." Then one day, the bully broke this guy's art project on purpose. He was about to hand in to be marked, and the kid snapped. He belted the absolute crap out of this bully, and we actually had to jump in and break it up because he was going to kill the guy, and it didn't look like he was stopping. I will never forget the bully turning up to school a few days later, and his face was so swollen and one eye was just completely closed, and black and blue from all the punches that he took to the face. I learned two things that day. One, bullies are cowards, and two, always be wary of the quiet ones. Story 11. I was in grade 9 and had a French teacher who was a complete pushover. My friend and I were getting paper tossed at the backs of our heads by 3 popular guys and girls. I told the teacher what was happening, he turned to them, and then they stopped, and he went on to his business. I go back to my seat, infuriated with the zero help that I'm getting from the teacher, and to nobody's surprise, the papers begin to fly once again. So I stand up, knock my chair back, turn to the teacher and tell him loudly, "I'm going to the principal." And then, after storming to the door, I pause at it, turn to the popular squad and tell them in front of the whole class who is staring at me, "You are not getting away with this." Needless to say, they stopped after that, even though I'm pretty sure the principal did nothing. Goes to show how tough bullies really are. All they want is someone who's not going to fight or speak back. Story 12. There was this one girl at our school who wasn't a bully. She was just mean AF. Me and the mean girl were on and off friends until 7th grade. And then she started hating me for God knows what. On kick, she would tell me to kill myself and keep harassing me. Now, nobody out of the 3 other people in the group chat did anything about it. I finally had enough, and with permission from my parents, I went to the school, waited for her until she got comfortable at her table, and then I went up and punched her right in the face. She said later on that it didn't even hurt, but she was crying when it happened. I hid in the bathrooms for the rest of the morning period and then was suspended for 3 days. The girl who was harassing me wasn't in trouble because I couldn't provide screenshots of her saying it in the group chat. And when I got back to school, I got so many high fives from other people that thought that, hey, she's mean, and they were cool with what I did. Story 13. I was approached by 3 dudes I've never met in my life when I was 12, who then proceeded to bully me. One who looked like a dang near carbon copy of Dudley Dursley from the movies, and 2 skinny minions. I was 70 pounds soaking wet and a tiny girl child, so Dursley smacked the frog I'd just caught out of my hands and then squeezed it in front of me until its eyes began to swell, and the other 2 cheering on in the background. Sucks for him though, because I spent most of my childhood stomping through creeks, lifting up fallen tree logs bigger than me like it's woodland CrossFit. I could pick up sewer covers by that age barehanded, and I punched him in the nose so hard I heard the crack. Dursley and his cronies went all jaw-dropped before the jerkhead threw the frog at my face for retaliation. It hit, but I caught it as it bounced off and then booked. Never saw those bastards again. Yeah, those bullies thought that they could mess with this person, but little did they know that they were a fearless force to be reckoned with. When the Dursley lookalike smacked out the frog, this person unleashed a powerful punch that literally made his jaw drop. Despite their feeble retaliation, you caught the frog and made your quick escape, leaving everybody in awe, never to be bothered again. It goes to show, don't underestimate your opponent no matter how small they look, and that there's always street strength and gym strength. This person definitely had street strength. Story 14. So I was in 6th grade and this kid kept harassing me about every aspect of myself, skin, country, religion, etc. He was part of the popular kids, and I had my little friend group. This school I was at made you bring your own snack for snack time, or suffer the consequences of spicy foods. Plastic bags were a very popular choice for carrying, and one day I decided to use a paper bag to bring my snack. I had a French class where I was sitting next to my friends, and I decided to leave class on this rainy day and consume my snack. Since there weren't any garbage dumps around, I placed my residue in the paper bag. When I returned to class, I found that kid in my spot, refusing to stand as he was next to his friends, his punching bags. A few aggressive words from him and he, out of nowhere, makes me an offer. My lunch for his seat. He thought my wet bag of junk was a greasy bag of goodness. The good child that I was about to say, "Hey, this isn't a lunch, it's actually my garbage." But instead, I handed him the bag of junk, and then he sprinted out of class as all my colleagues awed. I'm not the one to give up food. And then I sat down grinning as Kay heard the words, "Let's see what I got here. What the heck?" He ran back in, threw the bag at the floor, and everyone laughed as they realized what had transpired. That was the moment that I earned most people's respect in that school. Never again was I bullied. Story 15. I was from a third world country and didn't speak English too well, and was made fun of. To feel better, I ate. A lot. Then I was made fun of for being fat. And I worked on my English and started working out in the 7th grade. And one day, the group of kids that had made fun of me for the last 2 years came after me after school, and they started to push me down, kick, and punch me. Suddenly, I snapped and saw nothing but red. I jumped to my feet and started swinging like a wild animal. I kicked and punched and stomped down on heads and legs and arms. After a while, I snapped back and then saw small patches of blood on my shirt and pants. I ran home before my parents got home, changed, and threw the clothes away. The next day, and for the rest of the year, not one bully bothered me again. The first time I saw red. Story 16. Not me, but my cousin once finally got sick of a bigger kid who followed him around between school hours and at lunch and did things like punch him in the ribs when he didn't expect it, knee him in the nuts, and then trip him. All done very quickly and efficiently with as little noise as possible. The bully's family was rich enough to make him untouchable, and he knew it. And worse, he only picked on about 3 or 4 of the smallest kids that he could find, and got excellent grades. So one day, as my cousin was using the bathroom between classes, the bully comes in and bashes him headfirst into the wall before turning to walk away. My cousin says, "I'm not afraid of you, you a-hole," grabs him by the shoulder and races around him as fast as he can and punches him dead in the face. The bully didn't even look like he felt it. He beat the crap out of my cousin and then peed on him. It got a lot worse from then on out, and he eventually had to change schools. So that bully is a piece of work, like using your family's wealth as a shield for your cruel behavior. Despite the cousin's brave attempt to stand up to him, things kind of took a turn for the worse. The bully unleashed a brutal beatdown and actually resorted to such a vile act as peeing on them. That's a little disheartening to hear that things escalated to that point. So sometimes changing schools might become the necessary path to escape such relentless torment. Well, here's hoping that that cousin does find a better school where they can thrive in a bully-free environment and just leave those dark days behind them. In the comments, does anyone want to share their own standing up against a bully story?